Welcome to the instructional video for the Stitch Generator Tools 2.0. Today I'm going to go over how to install the new generator and how to use the generator inside of your Blender file. Once you have the zip file downloaded, you'll be able to install it by going to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, Install, and then select the zip file that you just downloaded. Make sure to activate the tool by clicking the check mark. Inside of the drop-down, you'll see some information about where you can find the tools, as well as a link to the documentation, which is this video. Once your add-on is installed, you will find the tools on the right side panel of your 3D view on your Stitch tools. Initially, only the Import Stitch Assets button is available. Clicking this will add the assets to your scene, and your Add Stitches to Mesh is grayed out. Once you select a mesh, you'll be able to add stitches to that mesh, which will add a curve that is attached to your mesh and put you in edit mode so you can start creating your stitches right away. There are three primary ways to add stitches. First being using the draw tool. Surface is automatically set and you can draw directly onto the surface to create stitches on the surface. The second method is using the curve pen tool, setting your snap to face project and ensuring that it is on. I like to keep it set to an auto vector type. You can create a vertex by clicking and using G to move it and snap it directly to your surface. The third method would be to back out of edit mode, select your mesh, and inside of edge mode, select a group of edges you would like to have stitches. Shift D to duplicate that, and P to separate it from your mesh initially. Select it, convert to curve. Then you can select that curve and your new blank stitch curve and Control J to join them together. This will create stitches exactly where that edge loop was. There are two sets of properties that you will be working with while you're editing your stitches. If you have any stitch active, you will actually have your active stitch settings in the panel. This will control the settings of the stitch that's currently selected. If you select anything other than that stitch, it will show you your defaults. These are the settings that are used every time you create a new stitch. If I were to create a stitch right now, the color is still white because I didn't change the default settings. With an active stitch selected, you can set those settings as the defaults with this button here. Then when you create a new stitch, those settings are used instead. A big setting to pay attention to is scale all. At value of 1, it means that your thread length is in millimeters. At 10, which is the default, it's set to centimeters. When you're making your stitches, make sure to set that ahead of time if you have a larger scene. Otherwise, your scene may crash as it creates too many stitches. The first set of properties control the thread itself. You can control your thread's color, the length of individual pieces of stitching, as well as the randomness within that, the width of the thread, the resolution, which is how high poly each thread is. Caution with high numbers as it can cause crashing in some scenes. The twist, which is how twisted your threads are together, and the number of strands for each stitch. Under stitch style, you'll be able to select the type of stitch, either single stitch, double stitch, or cross stitch. Each type of stitch has slightly different properties to change. For all stitches, you can control how loose the strands are, the rotation of each thread, the randomness of that rotation, the bump, which is how far the thread pulls away from your mesh, and how far from each other the stitches are. With double stitches, you'll also be able to control how far apart each set of stitches are. And with cross stitches, you'll be able to control the factor of the stitch, which is the shape. At 50%, it'll be a perfect 90-degree angle across each other. On either end, it'll shift closer together. The last set of controls is for your shading effects. These are created using planes on top of your geometry to add extra detail. The intensity of each affects how intense each of those effects are. And the scale affects the sizing of each of those effects. If you set the intensity to 0, it'll remove that mesh from your geometry entirely. If you do find that there is some clipping with your mesh because your mesh is not a flat mesh, moving the offset away will help reduce that clipping. If you go too far though, you will cover up your stitches. Try to find a good value for your mesh. Rounded meshes will require a higher number than flat meshes. As a reminder, if you add new stitches to the mesh, they will follow the default settings. If you want them to be the same as the stitches you've just edited, make sure you set those properties as the default before creating a new stitch. Even though there are only 3 main stitch types, you can still create some interesting effects by changing your properties. For example, rotating your stitch and putting them closer together will create stitches that go across your seam. You can change the rotation a little bit more for a slightly different effect. Try messing around with different settings to create various effects.